Little forward, you can see Triveni there. Okay. So not so many devotees today. Today we listen about Trivikram Swami Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
My internet. Hare Krishna. Krishna Kirtan, can you introduce Glorification?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So today we are having His Grace Golokeshwar Prabhu with us, and he will be introducing His Holiness Trivikram Maharaj. So Golokeshwar Prabhu has passed out from NIT Bhopal and he's currently serving in ISKCON Ujjain. And we are very fortunate to have Golokeshwar Prabhu because recently His Holiness Trivikram Maharaj was in Ujjain, and he was the one who served His Holiness Trivikram Maharaj for the last 3 days. So I just thought he was the perfect person who can introduce about His Holiness Trivikram Maharaj to us. So first of all, we will ask the host to share the screen, share the lecture, and then at 6 p.m., His Grace Golokeshwar Prabhu will give the introduction of His Holiness Trivikram Maharaj. Hare Krishna. So I just thought he was the perfect person who can introduce about His Holiness Trivikram Maharaj to us. So first of all, we will ask the host to share the screen, share the lecture.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
9. By that time, I'd been living in the temple for some time, 6 months or so, and he was staying at the at an apartment nearby. An Indian man had let him use his apartment while he was there in Buffalo. At that time, I got initiated. But I remember sitting in the back and watching Prabhupada behind his desk, and trying to understand, trying to kind of penetrate his mystery of Prabhupada. And suddenly I was looking like that, kind of trying to penetrating, and he looked up and he saw me looking at him.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
And he said, "Yes." I was like, yeah, I was caught, that I was kind of intruding in a sense. And then I lowered my eyes and I realized I couldn't know him in that way, but I had to somehow get his mercy if I wanted to really get to know him better. During the initiation ceremony, I remember we were taking the achman, the water, and and Prabhupada, I was into it, I thought, well, now, I was a little older, I was 26, I was going to give it a good try, this Krishna consciousness. I didn't know anything about it before. I thought, I was ready to graduate, so I thought, well, before I become involved in my career, so to speak, I was going to try this Krishna consciousness. So I was into it, and we were taking the water, and I was taking it, and drinking it, and I was doing it with a little enthusiasm, and Prabhupada turned to Brahmananda, who was there at the ceremony, and he said, "He's a good one," meaning me. So Prabhupada appreciated that we were a little, you can say, forward pushing, so to speak. But I remember he asked me a question. He said, "So what are you studying at the university?" I said, "Sociology." He said, "What does that mean?" I said, "Well, we study social problems like alcoholism and different problems we try to." And Prabhupada was sober for a minute, then he said, "Yes, they study alcoholism, and then after they're studying for the day, they say, okay, now we're finished, let's go have a drink." So he wasn't very, you can say, my impression was that he wasn't very inspired by the universities, by the education that they're giving. We would go on morning walk from there, so the devotees would come to Prabhupada's house in the morning. And then one morning, it was on an apartment, 3rd story, and we went to the apartment. We were coming out, and we locked the door, and I remembered I left my beads in there, so I asked the secretary, "Can I have the key real quickly? I get my beads." So I opened the door, got my beads, closed the door, and went down the hall just in time. You know, the devotees were still waiting for the elevator. Then we got on the elevator. So when I got on the elevator, then Prabhupada spoke to me. Just like you would speak to a 5-year-old child. And he said in a very slow voice, so I could understand, you know, "Did you lock the door?" He knew I had left my beads, and he thought, well, maybe I made another mistake. All the devotees started laughing, but I could understand. I was like a child in Prabhupada's presence. I was like a big fool, so I didn't mind. So then we came down on the morning walk, and I remember I was thinking, now, you know, Prabhupada's an old man, I have to protect him. And we were coming to the street, it was very busy. Cars were coming this way, that way, and I was thinking, I have to make sure, you know, I was looking on the left, and the cars, it was an opportunity to come and to pass, and I was going to help get Prabhupada, and I looked back, and Prabhupada was already across the street. he was very, you can say, worked very quickly and very bold, and as I felt like a little foolish, I was running after him, thinking I was protecting him, but I remember saying that after the first day of massage, then the next day I told Prabhupada, today I'm going to go to the library, Srila Prabhupada, and get a book on how to give a proper massage, because I don't, you know, I'm not very conversant. I said, no, that is not necessary. You read the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna will tell you how to give massage. So he didn't require that we had to study. Then I remember a couple days later, Prabhupada was asking me, so how is your health? I said, well, I have a little problem. I have a toothache. And Prabhupada said, oh, what are you doing for it? He was very concerned. I said, well, actually, I'm going to the dentist this afternoon. He says, oh. So the next morning I was coming, and his room was upstairs, and I would call up Hari Bol, and then he'd say, come on, if he was ready. Otherwise, he'd say, wait 5 minutes. So this time he said, come on. I came upstairs, and even before I got upstairs, he was asking me, so how is your tooth? And I felt a little bad. I was thinking, well, Prabhupada, you know, it's the most important person on the planet, and I got him worrying about my tooth, you know. But that was the way Prabhupada was. He was very concerned about, you know, individuals on that level. I remember another time in Tokyo, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, that Shyam Sundar was traveling with Prabhupada, and he was sick for some time, and then when he got better, he complained to Prabhupada that the devotees didn't properly take care of him when he was sick. And then Prabhupada called everybody. We had Istagosti, everybody. And then Prabhupada was saying, why is this? You didn't take care of him. We've given up everything. We've come to this side. And how is it that, you know, we should... And then he turned very feelingly to Shyam Sundar, and he said, with intensity and emotion in his voice, he said, why didn't you ask me? I would have come and nursed you, or whatever. So that was Prabhupada's mood. You know, he was very, very compassionate. And at the same time, very, very, you know, bold, and very, very, you know, strong if necessary. But we always got the feeling that he loved us, and that he wasn't exploiting us in any way. Prabhupada would often talk about his days as a child. We were in London, of course, on a big estate, and his memories, I guess, were coming about the British, and he would talk about Calcutta in the early days when the British, that was the capital of. And I remember once we looked out, and there was one driver that John Lennon had, big man named John. All he did was drive. That was his only service. So Prabhupada was asking me about him. I said, yes, that's all he does is drive. And Prabhupada said, that is a sign of a wealthy man, that he can keep somebody who only works a few minutes a day, perhaps. So then I got a little enthusiastic about it. I said, yeah, Prabhupada, he's very, very wealthy, John Lennon. And as soon as I did that, Prabhupada didn't like it. And he said, what is the use of all his money? He doesn't know how to spend it. And that really made sense to me, because at the time, John was excavating a big area to make a lake. And then they spent so much money, and then later on they changed their mind. They decided not to have a lake. And, you know, practically we saw that people had money, but what was the use of it? They didn't know how to spend it properly. So that was a good lesson. we were preaching, of course, in the city. We were staying in John Lennon's estate, but we were going regularly for programs. So there was one big program that was like the first time in London, and we were all there with Prabhupada in the evening. It was, and then Prabhupada was very strong in that program. There were many Indians were there for the first time, and they were challenging. Some of them were saying, you know, what about Lord Shiva, and what about this? And so we were just sitting in. Prabhupada was very forceful, and I remember once one man stood up and he was interrupting, and Prabhupada said, "Sit down, you are nonsense," in a public hall. You know? So it was that kind of a mood, and then after, of course, Prabhupada established Bhagavad Dharma, and so the next day I was giving massage, and it was due to be a series of lectures. So again, he was going to speak that night, and so I was like in the mood of giving, you know, getting him in shape for another knockout performance, you can say, like a trainer and a prize fighter. And I was talking, and I was talking adamantly, you know, not adamantly, but vividly, or with life, vividly, about Prabhupada and what he's done, and so on, and speaking and glorifying and flattering him. And then suddenly Prabhupada said, "No," with a very emphatic, authoritative voice. And then my hands like froze on his body. And then with another voice, just like a little child, like a 6-year-old boy, he said, "I am just a humble servant." And when he said that, I really felt that I didn't have any right to touch his body, and I was such a plebeian, and he was such an aristocrat, and the only by his mercy that I was even allowed in the same room with him, what to speak of touching him, that he was such a high-class person, and I felt like going under the rug or something. But that was a wonderful lesson for me, that I could see that Prabhupada really thought of that of himself, that it was his real identity, that he was a servant. He wasn't he didn't think of himself as a big something. He thought of himself as a servant of his spiritual master, and he wasn't impressed with some kind of flattery. So that was a very nice exchange for me. Prabhupada was getting ready to leave. We've been there for 3 months, and I was a little attached to the service, so I wanted to stay with him. I wanted to continue that service. I wanted to go to America. Actually, he was going to Boston. So I was asking if it was all right if I could come, and he said, "Let us see." He never said no. But one day his secretary came, and he said, "You know, you should stop bothering Prabhupada about going to America, that Upendra is there. He's going to do that service, and it's already settled, so you can't come." So that day I was giving massage, and I said, "Purushottam, your secretary, said, Prabhupada, that Upendra is going to do the massage when you come to America." Actually, we were alone. It was in a car. I was driving Prabhupada to the temple from his apartment. So Prabhupada was silent, so I knew it was true. So I was a little discouraged, but I thought, well, after all, I shouldn't disturb Prabhupada by that. So I could see that he was a little sober, and so I thought, let me change the subject and just make another subject, and so he doesn't feel like it. So I said, so Upendra is going to do this service, Prabhupada? Who is Upendra? He's a good boy? As I never met Upendra. And then Prabhupada appreciated that. He turned to me. I was driving the car, and he turned to me and he said, "He is not as nice as you." But very feelingly. And so Prabhupada could see that I was sacrificing, that I wasn't going to insist, my right is I should be able to come with you, I've asked you, and so on. I was renouncing that, and Prabhupada appreciated it. It was a nice exchange. Yeah, as we were moving in, the devotees were setting up Prabhupada's desk, so Janaki was there. She called to Prabhupada. She said, "Srila Prabhupada, where do you want the lamp?" And Srila Prabhupada said, "Yeah, just keep it there next to the picture of Prabhupada." So we kind of all stopped, because we never heard Prabhupada refer to his spiritual master as Prabhupada. So Prabhupada picked up on the fact that we were all looking at him, and he said, "Yes, I have my Prabhupada too." So that was a nice remembrance of how Prabhupada was appreciating his spiritual master. There was a very nice exchange that Prabhupada had with one of the parents of his disciples. It was in Detroit, 71. We were just looking in the window Actually, we just do that. We would listen and look in the window and watch Prabhupada when he was unobserved, and he didn't seem to mind. So he was talking to this mother of the devotee, and she was about 50 years old, and so she spoke in like as one adult to another to Prabhupada. She said to Prabhupada, she said, you know, these young boys and girls, they actually worship you, you know, like a confidential thing. And Srila Prabhupada understood the purport immediately, and he said, yeah. He said, I'm also worshiping my spiritual master. That is the process. That is our process. So in this way, it was diffused, you know. Ordinary people would think, oh, this is very unusual, you know, a human being is being worshipped. But Prabhupada made it just like an ordinary thing, that this is the process. I'm also worshiping my spiritual master. They're worshiping me. It's not something extraordinary. It's the tradition. It's the parampara. Then, of course, the lady, she couldn't say anything. She just had to accept. So we would go every day to give massage at his apartment. And I remember once I was chanting, while I was waiting, he was finishing correspondence. So he looked up and he said, you listen when you chant Hare Krishna? So I was thinking, you know, immediately my response was defensive. I was thinking, of course I listen, otherwise why am I doing it? So he read my mind. And he said, I know you listen, but you have to listen very carefully. This chanting is the whole essence of our philosophy. I was asking Prabhupada sometimes, 1969, whether he thought I should remain brahmachari or get married. And Prabhupada said, it doesn't matter. You can be Krishna conscious from any ashram. This is the main thing, just to be Krishna conscious. And so I accepted that. But then once he was giving lecture there, and he talked about how he took sannyas, and how he was thinking, how can I leave my wife and family and children? But somehow my spiritual master was coming to me in a dream, and my godbrother was pushing me, and so I took sannyas. He said, now I have so many children, and without the botheration of a wife. So that next day when I gave massage, I said, Srila Prabhupada, you were saying that yesterday in the talk, in your lecture, that a wife was a botheration. So Prabhupada looked at me, he smiled, he said, I said that? With me, he was always like non-committal until he asked me to take sannyas a couple of years later. But you know, it was something, because he saw I was a little older, and that if I wanted to take sannyas or brahmachari, remain brahmachari, he wouldn't object. If I wanted to get married, he wouldn't object. It was like that. So I remember one time in the later days, 1977, Srila Prabhupada was in his room in Mayapur, and one of his godbrothers was there, and they were talking about the history of the Gaudiya Math, and how the Gaudiya Math had failed and had not remained united as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had wanted it to be reunited. And Srila Prabhupada was speaking very, you know, you can say respectfully, because it was his godbrother, but he was also speaking very authoritatively. And when he spoke on this point, he spoke with full conviction. He said, it is my opinion that the difficulty was they tried to create one acharya. And he said, you cannot create acharya. You cannot create. Acharya may emerge, but you cannot create. But they tried to create, and therefore everything was spoiled. So I remember Prabhupada spoke with full authority on this point, and this is a very important point that's actually philosophically has helped me over the years, that some people may claim to be acharya or something, but it's not an easy thing to just... And so Prabhupada gave us the GBC as a workable system, although we may not, any of us individually, but if faith he had, collectively we could keep on the right course. So I saw that Prabhupada was very strong in this point, and that about creating somebody artificially every year, another acharya. Then at that another time, his pastime in that room in Mayapur, Prabhupada, 1975, Gopal Krishna Maharaj was the GBC for India. So he came to me and he said, Bhavananda is going to be leaving Mayapur, so Prabhupada wants you to stay and be co-director with Jai Pataka. So I said, I'm not going to stay, Gopal. I already have a plan. I'm going to preaching in the Far East, and I have some devotees going to go with me, and I'm not going to stay here. So then later in the afternoon, I was in Prabhupada's room during darshan, and Gopal Krishna was also there. Many devotees were there. And Gopal Krishna raised his hand. He said, Srila Prabhupada, Trivikram Swami said he's not going to stay here in Mayapur. And there was this silence, and Prabhupada looked at me and he said, so, what is the problem? You don't want to stay here? I said, well, Prabhupada, I already have a program. And Prabhupada said, our formula is plain living and high thinking, but you're simply addicted to the city. And then I said, but Srila Prabhupada, this preaching here in Mayapur, I'm not very enlivened by it. I'd rather go there. And he said, you're a sannyasi? You've given up everything but your whim. And still I was objecting. I said, but Prabhupada, I've been a sannyasi for 5 years and I haven't had a chance to preach. Because everywhere, and in English, I've always been in the Far East or somewhere where I couldn't preach in English. If I stay here in Mayapur, I won't be able to preach. So Prabhupada said, oh, you've been a sannyasi for 5 years and you haven't had a chance to preach? What makes you think you know how to preach? So then something inside me said, yes, sir. Like I was in the Navy and, I just kind of was trained up to respect superior a little bit. At that point, I realized that Prabhupada was my superior. I better just shut up and do what I was told. And so I stayed for some time. And then I heard from Prabhupada's secretary, Upendra, that the devotees in Japan had been thrown out of the country and that our society was in jeopardy. So I was a little disturbed because I had spent 3 years in Japan and I kind of felt that the devotees who went there, headed by Guru Kripa Yasananda, were like in a mood, in a passionate mood a little bit, collecting money, and they didn't care so much for the society being registered and keeping it. So I went in that kind of a mood in Prabhupada's room. As soon as I heard it, and Prabhupada was alone, I said to him, I knew this was going to happen. I just blurted out. Prabhupada looked at me like, who's this aborigine coming into my room? And then I said, now we're being, thrown out of Japan, and we had Radhakrishna deities there, and so Prabhupada kind of sat on the bed, and he became a little sober, and he said, I did not want it that this should happen. So then he said, all right, so you can go back. And I was like shocked. I said, oh God, what have I done? And I opened my mouth now, and I'm going to have to go back to Japan, which I didn't really want to do. But that was the way Prabhupada dealt. If you had an objection, a complaint, then you had better also be ready to make a solution, and not just to go there and lodge complaint without being, ready to put your neck on the line, so to speak. And so the next day, I told Prabhupada, yes, I'm willing to go back if that's what you want. And he sent me back. I went back with Shatadanya, and we kept the center open and kept the deity worship going. I personally was the pujari. But it was a good lesson that, because it's so easy to criticize. But Prabhupada didn't appreciate that unless we had the positive correction to it. Otherwise, it's better to shut up. And then I was deputed to drive him from the airport to the temple. And I was reminding him a little bit about, I was talking, again, I was quite adamant in talking, and reminding him about my experience with him in London, in case he had forgotten, and saying how, I asked him if I could give massage while he was here. I was driving, and there were 3 devotees in the back, the GBC, they were quiet. And Prabhupada was also quiet, I was the only one talking. And asking him that, I said, oh, you have been, I asked him if he had been to Russia. I heard he had just gone to Russia, and I said, so what was it like in Russia? Tell me, how was it? You were in Russia, Prabhupada? And Prabhupada just said, yes. But he didn't get into conversation with me. He didn't want to, become like my buddy and start jibber-jabbering with me like an equal. And everybody in the back laughed because the way Prabhupada did it, it was clear that he was like telling me to, okay, cool it, just shut up a little bit and just let me talk as I see fit. Not don't be pumping me for questions. And so, although Prabhupada was very humble, he could also be very, very straightforward, and he would go right to the point, and he wasn't embarrassed to be blunt and to be personal. We were in Bombay, 1976 or so, and Srila Prabhupada was there, and one yogi came. And he was adamant, not adamant, but animated. He was lively and discussing with Prabhupada and back and forth. And somehow the talk came to the point of a spiritual master, and then I got into the conversation. I said, yes, this is the basic point. We have to accept a spiritual master. And of course I was thinking that, this man should accept Prabhupada as a spiritual master. So Prabhupada immediately picked up on it, and he looked at me like, shut up, get out of this conversation, it's over your head. Don't be lecturing to this guy. He said that just with his eyes. He didn't say all those words, but I could understand that was the purport. That, Prabhupada had a relationship with this man, and he didn't want me to be telling him that, you should, telling him anything, really. And he was an advanced person. It was a nice lesson. Another time, he was discussing with another important person, and in Bombay, and there, and then during the lull in the conversation, I started to say something, and Prabhupada looked at me like, what are you what are you doing now? But I quoted some verse which was appropriate to Prabhupada's point that he was making about how we should be eager. This eagerness is the price. Even greedy, loyam, mulyam, eklam, loyam. So when I started, then Prabhupada saw that I was contributing something. Then he immediately took it and was animated, and he continued preaching. And so we could speak in front of Prabhupada, but you better be sure that especially when he was preaching, you better be sure it was something that you could, feeding him, so to speak, and understanding the mood he was in, and otherwise, if you just change the subject to something, Prabhupada could become very disturbed. Another time, we were on the morning walk in Vrindavan, and there was a similar thing. Prabhupada had been speaking and coming back, and then I spoke. I said, "This reminds me of a teacher I had when I was in the university, Srila Prabhupada." And Prabhupada looked at me again with that same look. This better be a good story. Everybody stopped, and Prabhupada stopped. And then I told the story how he was a big philosophy teacher, but when he became sick, he changed his philosophy. So Prabhupada had been sick at the time. This was 74 in Vrindavan. So when I told it Prabhupada, then he laughed and he said, "Yes, we're not changing our philosophy because we become sick," and so we appreciated that. But sometimes, I said things that were wrong, inappropriate, and he wouldn't hesitate to chastise me. Even in the last days when he was lying on his bed, he couldn't even move. I said something inappropriate, and Prabhupada showed his displeasure to me. He was talking about the doctor who was coming from Calcutta, the final doctor, and he was asking his secretary. Actually, he called his secretary, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and I was along with him, but he was asking him questions, and then at the end of that, then he said, he changed the subject. He said, "So has he left yet?" And I thought that he was talking about the doctor, so I jumped in and said something inappropriate. I said, "Yes, he's already left." And then everybody was quiet. The whole room was quiet. Tamal Krishna very intelligently didn't say anything. And Prabhupada looked at me and he said, "Who did you think I mean?" Then I realized I was on thin ice, and I started backpedaling and saying, "Well, I guess I was just speculating, Prabhupada. Who did you think I mean?" He wouldn't let me off. He just kept on pushing. And I said, I was talking about the doctor. And then Prabhupada didn't say anything, but he just turned on his bed and he gave me like a cold shoulder. He turned his shoulder, and it felt like it went right into my heart. He didn't say a word, but just a gesture, a slight gesture, And I felt, oh boy, what have I done? You know, disturbed the spiritual master, especially in these days when he was. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, who were you referring to, Srila Prabhupada? And then Prabhupada said, my son, because his son had been there also, and he was due to leave. And so then he started talking and explained. To me, the most, you can say, striking quality of Prabhupada was this, his ability to encourage everyone to, you wouldn't say flatter, but to somehow get them to make an attempt to sacrifice for Krishna, to sacrifice for their own good, for the sacrifice for a spiritual life. That he was so expert at seeing a little good quality and fanning it and making it come up. And I remember thinking at one time, this is the most extraordinary thing about Prabhupada, that he's really has this wonderful ability. And because that's why he attracted so many people, because everybody could see that he was seeing that, the best in me. And that was the first impression that Prabhupada gave, that he would see the best in you. And later on, of course, he may correct you, but that was because you knew it was out of love. He actually knew, he saw the best of you, so you always had the feeling that he was your well-wisher. Whereas a teacher, ordinary person, even parents, you always had the feeling, well, maybe they're a little envious, or maybe there's a little motive there, but not with Prabhupada. That was, I thought, was the most impressive qualification, that he had such compassion. And still does, as you say. And we need it, otherwise, without his mercy, what is our position?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Dhanvat Pranam Maharaj, and all the devotees.
Yes, we can hear.
So I have been given this opportunity to discuss something about Maharaj. So it's a great honor. So I respectfully beg mercy from all of you so that I can justify and purify myself. Om Agyanate Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmaditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Prasharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Paschataristarine Pancha Kalpataru Bhiksha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vishnubhyo Namo. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. His Holiness Trivikram Swami Maharaj ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I'm sharing a small presentation with all of you. Can just see on the screen. So we were very fortunate. On 29th, Maharaj gave us opportunity to have his association at Ujjain, and I was given this fortune to serve him in ISKCON Ujjain while he stayed. Maharaj only stayed for 2 days, but that was very impactful. The way Maharaj came and associated and gave his wonderful lectures. So we'll just have a brief introduction of Maharaj. So as you all know, Maharaj is one of the most senior disciples of Srila Prabhupada. He was born in 1941, and Maharaj actually was in Navy. He was doing his study, and previously he was in Navy. So Maharaj had that skeptical attitude, or how you can say, cocky American or doubtful American attitude, that he would not accept anyone very easily. So when Maharaj came into contact with Srila Prabhupada, so just as a strong person logical person tries to calculate and see and test, similarly Maharaj tried to test every time Srila Prabhupada. And by reading books, however, he was convinced with the philosophy. He already was convinced, but still he was like, he wanted to be convinced to surrender to Srila Prabhupada. And at last Maharaj said that for 2 years I tried and I could not find any fault in Srila Prabhupada. And I knew that this is the perfect person to surrender. So Maharaj got initiated by Srila Prabhupada in 1969. And just 2 years later, in 1971, he was given sannyas. So Maharaj narrated a small incident just now, like Maharaj was having a personal service of Srila Prabhupada by massaging him. So when once he was massaging Srila Prabhupada, so Srila Prabhupada told him, I am thinking to give you sannyas. So Maharaj replied that, Srila Prabhupada, I don't know if I am qualified or how can I take sannyas, because he had read that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur took sannyas at 45, age of 45. So it's too early for me, he thought in mind. Then Srila Prabhupada looked at him and came close to him and told, do you want to get married? So Trivikram Maharaj told, no, Srila Prabhupada, of course not. So Srila Prabhupada leaned back, then take sannyas. And finally, Maharaj took sannyas in 71. So 2025, 54 years of sannyas. So a wonderful and really commendable position Maharaj has. So after Srila Prabhupada gave him this responsibility, so Maharaj traveled various places, Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, India, and had a deep faith. Srila Prabhupada once remarked in his letter, Trivikram Swami goes wherever I send him, like that. Like that, he had many personal interaction with Srila Prabhupada, like he narrated in so many ways. So always Srila Prabhupada knew that Maharaj is little tough person. So he knew how to handle him actually. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada was sometimes very hard and sometimes encouraging also with him. So then Maharaj, as you know, he took preaching in different areas. And once in one letter, I don't know it's mentioned here. No. Yeah. I will like to show you once. Yeah. Yeah. Just a second. Yeah. Yeah, you can see on the screen, this is a letter to Mukunda written in 1969. So you can see the highlighted part. So far as Trivikram is concerned, he is a super first class brahmachari. His service attitude, his submission is very nice. Although still he is a new member. So you can imagine Srila Prabhupada is giving this compliment. He is a super first class brahmachari. So how wonderful should be Maharaj's attitude. And therefore you can see that 2 years later Maharaj got sannyas. So in that way he had a wonderful service attitude and pleased Srila Prabhupada by his service. So Maharaj travels through various places. His preaching base is at Poland and continuously in Eastern Europe, he travels in various places like that. And still Maharaj is like very active. He is 82 years old, still very active and lively. Maharaj got the position of Guru in 1987, and since then he has been initiating disciples. What I personally like, yeah, this was mentioned. What I personally got to see from Maharaj's character is that Maharaj focuses on kirtan and philosophy, two things. Like kirtan, Maharaj is very, very enthusiastic, always full of energy for kirtan. When I went to receive him at the airport, so we were coming back. So it was around 9 o'clock morning. So Maharaj started to sing Guru Puja in car. And he did whole kirtan, Guru Puja, then Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, then 20 minutes kirtan also he did. So we also sang. So I just thought that, see, Maharaj is so conscious that since he didn't attend Guru Puja, he is doing in the car only. So that is the commitment of these wonderful sons of Srila Prabhupada. And we can see by their personal example how much they are surrendered and ready to go to any extent for serving Srila Prabhupada. So this was the small interaction. And what else I got to know is Maharaj is very very straightforward person. Like what is good, what he wants to say, he will say it directly. No here and there, nothing like that. So his servant also was telling me like this, that you have to be very to the point to Maharaj. He doesn't waste any time like that. So in that way, we received, although it was very little association, because Maharaj doesn't gave us so much of personal time. We were not at his quarter. Maharaj used to stay alone only, just for serving prasad, and while in the class we used to take Maharaj's association. And Maharaj is very very regulated in his schedule, and therefore his servant was telling, his disciple was telling Nandu Dalal Prabhu, that if someone asks how Maharaj is maintaining this health, Maharaj doesn't use stick to walk. He can walk and run also like that in this age. So the servant was telling two things. Maharaj told, kirtan and regulated diet. Two things keep him lively. And because he has the taste in holy name, so he is able to regulate the urge for eating. Because most of the time we overeat because of taste of prasad. But because his taste is in holy name, so that keeps him regulated in eating. And therefore, he is quite fit to travel. Just I saw that Maharaj was traveling. Every place he's staying for 2 days, then another flight, then 2 days, another flight, then 2 days, another flight, like that. So at this age, we can see how he is continuously, he is full of enthusiasm. And his servant was also telling that Maharaj, now we are at this age, now we are gaining experience. When we will be old, then the whole world will look upon us to share your experiences of Krishna consciousness, to guide them. At that time, if you would not have a proper health, then how you will able to give them proper instruction or guidance? So therefore, Maharaj is maintaining him and traveling and inspiring devotees in such a way. So it was very fortunate to meet Maharaj. And although we got very little time for his association, we hope that in future we will get more association and opportunity to serve him. So this was my little interaction with Maharaj. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. I can share something.
Yes.
In America, Florida, where is Dylan? Maharaj actually there in Florida. He based on that. So Maharaj very simple. Travels alone, drives car alone. And once there was festival of food. We opened a stall there. Our 6-7 devotees were there, more than 6-7 devotees. I wore short pant and selling that. And in that mela, Maharaj is alone doing kirtan and some books in his arm. And doing the Hare Krishna Muhammad alone in the mela. Or we are selling food. So I've seen how much taste is for holy name. Nobody is with him. He's alone doing kirtan and traveling in this mela. And you are not thinking that it is Indian Mela, it is outside. Nobody understands what is happening. But he is singing. That time he has taste for holiness. And also in Florida temple, we cannot expect devotees like India. Sometimes nobody. So he'll be alone there, and alone is singing Mangalarati every day. There is without fail. And not so many giving so much respect to him, but he don't worried about that. Sometimes he called, "Can I come to Dylan?" Maharaj, it is our great pleasure. What you are saying? Please come. So Maharaj will come, and he does not eat anything there. He'll come, give class, do kirtan, and he'll leave. He don't want to eat anything. He's very much strict about it. So it is my misfortune that I was not there. So yesterday I talked to Maharaj and requested him. He said yes. This year he will come again. And I think Maharaj to stay at least minimum 1 week for Ayurvedic treatment. Maharaj said, may not be Ayurvedic treatment, but I will come this year. He promised us. Thank you very much. And I also want to request you all that this class is so important. Now, see, there is a book, Gaur Pastor Charitavali. People want to know about the Prabhupada Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associate. So the same way, people will want to learn about the associate of Srila Prabhupada. So it is a humble endeavor to know about Srila Prabhupada's disciples. This is going in English. We hope it will continue in Bengali, Hindi, and Uriya and other languages also. So those who understood that it is very important, please keep attending the class. Due to my busy schedule, I cannot attend regularly. But I am humbly requesting those who are thinking it's very important, inspire others also. It is not so easy to get to know about Srila Prabhupada's disciple. Still, there is no forum to know about the disciple of Srila Prabhupada like this. So it is our humble attempt. So please make it successful. I am sure Srila Prabhupada and our previous acharyas will be very happy as we are glorifying the pure devotees. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Holiness Trivikram Swami Maharaj ki jai. Jagat Krishna Prabhupada ki jai. Glorification Prabhu ki jai. Gauraman. Glorification Prabhu, his health is not good. Still is doing youth preaching in Indore also. New devoted training. And also so many other services also. Small services like seeing the electricity department, other so many departments, wherever, including the personal service of the senior devotees. Though he's compromising his body, he's not what is called physically strong. He has some health problem. Still, he's enthusiastic and dependable services. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Done with pranam.
Done with pranam.